There are 4 bold red letters behind me. But also underneath of them, there are 2 words that are very important to my heart. This is the first neighborhood where I started my own business. And I started that for one reason. I am a painter at heart, and I wanted to share art with the community. And this, I feel, living in multiple neighborhoods in the city of Chicago, is the most creative neighborhood in Chicago. Who's with me there? Right. But long before I got to Pilsen, I was born and raised in a very small town of Ohio. My mom is here tonight joining us. I was raised by an independent mother. Very lucky and fortunate to have that. I know a lot of children don't have that. And the standard of living in my hometown is what I really want to talk about, the start and the end of how we got to this position, but also how the standard of our education within communities affects the standard of living in which we live our lives, how it affected me and how it affects the people that I interact with now as a teacher for the public school system. My small town was like most rural small towns in Ohio. The standard of living was primarily in education. If you were a teacher or you worked for the education system, odds are that you were among the top 80 percentile in the high standard of living. A few doctors here and there, perhaps some entrepreneurs, mostly family-owned businesses, the typical small town type of United States families. But the education system was great, no complaints. I was a crazy student, very brilliant, I would say, which means I was all over the wall. I was a talker, so this is fitting today. As a student, my senses were always very alive. I could be sitting in a classroom, and I remember at the age of 10 in 5th grade, sitting in a classroom, I could see that on the left side, there was a squirrel running around. My peripheral vision on the right, I could see green flashing off of Jennifer's backpack. Behind me, my other friend Taylor was talking and having a conversation with somebody else. I could process that at the same time of speaking to somebody next to me, but also be thinking of, what am I going to do on recess? All of these things, when one woman was standing in front of me trying to tell me something in a completely different way that just didn't transfer to me. My senses were so heightened as a child, and they're still heightened as an adult because I tap into that as a creative person, that I couldn't focus for more than 5 seconds without thinking of the next thing going on around me. There was no way for me to transfer all of these things down onto a piece of paper. Now I understand that that's through painting and through creative things and outlets. But at the time, in our standard of education of which we still live in, there was no way for me to thrive in that classroom. So I did what I do best when I'm bored. I started talking to all my friends and socializing. And I went where most kids that I think are very brilliant in our education system go when they get to that point where I was frustrated and I didn't know what to do. I got to sit in the hallway. That lonely, lonely place where I spent most of my young adult years in education. I wanted to be a teacher because I loved my teachers, and in my small town, the teachers were the friendliest, most amazing people that I knew. They were at the grocery store, they were everywhere. I was lucky enough to have mentors along the way that supported me and helped me, despite the fact I came from a very low standard of living. I didn't know that. I didn't know that we didn't have money or that we were poor. I was just a kid. But along the way, people helped me because they saw that I wanted to be a teacher. So I went to college. About 6 months before college was over, a woman stood in front of me and told me that I wasn't going to graduate and be a teacher in the small town of Ohio. All of my dreams were not going to come true. Unfortunately, I couldn't pass a test of certification that was required in the state of Ohio. Now, imagine that moment as a young adult, 21, and knowing that I had already come so far, right? Despite emotional difficulties, which we've all had, financial difficulties growing up, lack of support from our government, for me, coming from a single-parent home. I hit rock bottom because I realized I wasn't going to get it. But I had already done everything to get it, and that's not fair. So at that moment, I decided to change everything. Why was I trying to teach for a school system that did not work for me? I couldn't sell it to my students as a teacher because I didn't believe in it. I knew that I was brilliant. I knew that I was smarter than most of the people who were graduating on time. But I also didn't have the money to wait another year to graduate with the rest of them. I hit rock bottom and noticed that at that moment, I wasn't meant to be that type of teacher. And I knew that I was going to do something different, something for me. Not just me, but for all the little kids running around with, they coin it now, ADHD, but I would say it's pure brilliance. Pure brilliance. No, I really mean that. What's going to happen to these kids? Because if I worked that hard and I was that highly motivated, where do they sit at the end of the day? I had a mentor who told me, if you can be an effective teacher with no resources, you can teach anybody anything. So I moved to a third world country the day after I graduated from college, and I learned a standard of living that was completely different than the standard of living I was raised in, because in my small town, we didn't have a lot of money. But we had shoes on our feet. We had running water. Didn't matter if we had to boil it because it wasn't hot. It was running, and we had a bath. We were so lucky because we got to go to school. And there are places still that don't get to go to school. I returned home from there and I moved to the city of Chicago because at that point I was going to save the world through art, because art saved my life, right? So I moved to CPS. I figured I had a little bit on my hands because I heard there was a 50% dropout rate. Good place to start saving the world. I was going to do it one painting at a time. You better believe I've been working on that for 7 years. I had a great standard of living. I had made it. In my small town, I guarantee I've had the notes coming at me for years now. The fact I even made it out into the city of Chicago to become a teacher was a pretty big deal, I think, for most people to think about. I had a great apartment in a great neighborhood. My standard of living was well. I had great friends, great things going on. And every morning, I got on a bus 45 minutes away to my new school where I was going to save the world, and I realized very quickly, only 45 minutes away, I had been submerged in another third world country where my students weren't safe walking to school, had the fear of being shot, where they were dealing with emotional and malnutrition problems that the government was not helping. I was happy we had air conditioning. And I didn't really care about our lack of resources because I knew how to teach art with trash. And I could teach everybody something without a pencil. It didn't matter to me. My favorite quote is by one of my favorite artists. His name is Johnny Depp. And he says something of this sort. Please don't quote me, but you can close your eyes to that to which you do not want to see, but you cannot close your heart to that you do not want to feel. I love that quote because I had a new life, and it was beautiful, and it was shiny and new. It was exactly what I wanted. But over here, I could still feel students that were me, that just wanted a better life for their children and for their next generations. Not a lot, just a little. When we think of rethinking standards, we have to rethink our own standard of living. What do I need? And we have to open our eyes and see that there are people very close to where we live that also need something from us. I had a problem with this speech. Couldn't sleep on Monday. Well, I haven't slept for a week, so let's just be honest here. But Monday was great. It was Memorial Day. There was a beautiful barbecue. My friend said, "How's it going?" "Fine. I'm ready." No, didn't sleep on Monday. Wasn't sure really what I wanted to leave you guys with, or there's so many stories you can tell as a teacher. If we have any educators in the room, you know. I guess I wanted to leave you with, art saved my life, and that's why I teach art. But that honestly on Tuesday changed, and I came to a new realization. Tuesday morning I went to the gym. I got a message from my colleague, another beautiful woman at the age of 24 trying to save the world through education. And it was a message saying that Monday, one of our students was shot in the back, walking down the street, probably on his way to a barbecue as well, in my second period class, which meant this whole week we had to go through a process, which I've been through many times in the last 7 years. Ten blocks away from where I was having a barbecue, I realized there was absolutely no sketch pad in the whole world, nothing big enough that my students could hold that would save that from happening to them. And I realized, as I think we all need to do when you look in the mirror and have an ego check of what you do with your time and what you do with your money, that I was being insanely ineffective as an educator. I was being selfish and thinking that art was going to help my kids find their creative voices and they were going to become better. I thought art saved my life that senior year of college when I didn't get to go home and graduate and live in my small town. But the truth was, art is a process. It's a beautiful, creative process. It helps me get out a lot of anger, a lot of fear, a lot of emotions that my senses, as always, don't know how to write down or how to say. But what saved my life and what brought me to the point where I have a beautiful gallery in a beautiful neighborhood in the city of Chicago, I'm very proud of, and we do a lot of amazing things there, was not the paintings. It's not the process of art. It's the actual fact that every step of my life, there was somebody who did this. Who gave me a place to stay when I didn't have a place to stay, who gave me food to eat when I didn't have anything in my refrigerator, who sat down and had a conversation with me because they saw I was frustrated and maybe they could help, who introduced me to somebody who could get me a job that I did not deserve because they saw that I was driven and I wanted it, who then introduced me to another person. We call this networking, right? And because I was a talker, I became a networker, right? I don't want to take my students out of their neighborhood. I don't want to save their lives. I hope they find creativity as exciting as I do, but I hope you all do too. What I want to do is create something in their community that they can get into, that they love, or I want to create an opportunity for them to where they're capable of standing in front of an audience like this and feeling pride, as I do right now, but I didn't always feel. It's not about art. It's about connecting them to people. And I have human capital in my life, and I have networks, and I can do that. So I decided Wednesday, that would be yesterday, I'm no longer teaching art. Because everybody has to ego check themselves and not do the definition of insanity, which is to do the same thing over and over again for selfish reasons. I was selfish in thinking that they were going to share my joy for art and that you would as well. When really what I needed to know is what they needed from me was for me to empower them so that they could stand alone. If I never saw them again, they would be empowered to go out into another community or to build up their own community because they met me as a teacher. If you're not empowering somebody right now in that way, if you want to keep your eyes closed and you want to turn off the TV and say, oh, it's warm, it's summer, and this happens every year, you can do that. And I respect that, because we all have our own comfort zones. But I'm asking you, if you're willing to step out of that comfort zone and put somebody else in a higher standard of living, because unfortunately we have so many gaps in our education system that we cannot fix, please let me know. Because I have a lot of students that would just love to meet you. Thank you.